Welcome to the Freedive Café, episode 29 with Walid Boudhiaf. My name is Donnie. I'm the host of the Freedive Café. The Freedive Café is long-form interviews that get into the backstories, the training, the challenges, the passions, the fears, and personal philosophies of the world's freedivers. Go to freedivecafé.com to see where all the episodes live with their show notes and the blog, which is kind of hibernating right now, but that's where the show lives on the internet. If you like the podcast and want to know when a new episode is released, be sure to subscribe to the show through your favorite podcast provider. If you're on an Apple device, search for the Freedive Café on the Apple Podcast app. And on Android devices, I recommend the Stitcher app. That's the one that I use. But as far as I know, there's a whole bunch of apps where the show can actually be found. Don't forget, if you need freediving buoys or lanyards, I would highly recommend free equipment. Amazing gear designed by amazing Ukrainian freediver Alexander Bubenchikov. I just ran my very first freediving course out of my little school. Not only did it go really well, but I had the buoy Alexander gave me, and my students and I were super comfortable all weekend out on the open water on that thing. It's built like a tank, super spacious inside, and pretty sexy too, as far as buoys go. As Freedive Café listeners, you get free worldwide shipping on this stuff. Don't miss out on that. Go to the website tobefreeequipment.com and in the order notes write Freedive Café, free shipping, and no matter where you are in the world, you will get your gear delivered for free. Okay, I really did not realize how quickly time was running away from me this month. I'm back at work in the real world and I'm running courses out of my little freediving school already, and the podcast is kind of being delayed again. But I'm still committed to getting 4 episodes out this month, so expect them to come thick and fast now. So last time I asked you guys what you thought about having a Q&A section at the end of each episode. I didn't get a whole lot of feedback, but what I did get was all saying, yes, do it. So I'll start doing that from the beginning of the official season, the official second season of the podcast. We'll see how it goes. We'll try it out. And if I get a lot of questions and it's worth doing, then I'll keep doing it. If it seems like I'm not really getting enough questions to keep the thing going, then we can always stop with it. Second season, what does that even mean? Well, as amazing as it sounds, especially to me, the podcast has been going for nearly a year now. And on July the 1st, we'll celebrate the 1-year anniversary. And we're going to have a very special guest as well. I'll also consider that the start of the second season. So we'll do a season a year and start doing those Q&A bits from then. Keep your ears open for more info on that coming soon. By the way, I'd also just like to add that I don't have time right now to write material for the blog, but if anyone else would like to contribute to that, feel free to get in touch and let me know what you'd like to do. If you're a big fan of the show and would like to support me in my endeavor to provide the world with hundreds of hours of audio education and entertainment goodness all about freediving, then go to patreon.com/freedivecafe and become a supporter. You can donate whatever you want and every penny is appreciated. If you are already a Patreon supporter, it has come to my attention that not many people are getting the Patreon messages about the upcoming guests, and so you're missing out on the opportunity to ask them their questions. Right, so make sure your Patreon emails are not getting sent to the trash, and make sure to check in with Patreon for new messages regularly, okay? And on my side, I'll also make sure to put an alert out on the Freedive Café Facebook page every time I do that, which I often forget to do. Okay, today at the Freedive Café, I'm serving up Walid Boudhiaf. Walid Boudhiaf is a French-Tunisian freediver currently living in Colombia and the Caribbean. He has achieved a depth of 116 meters in competition in free immersion and was ranked second in the 2017 world rankings for that discipline. He also runs depth competitions and teaches his training and breathing techniques, mainly in the Caribbean. And I see that just yesterday at the Carribean Cup, Walid got a new national record for Tunisia with a huge 111 meter constant weight dive. Well done, Walid. Let's see what he has to say for himself in this fascinating interview. Let's dive. Okay, so Walid, thank you so much for joining us here. Thank you from the listeners of the Freedive Café. I know it's early morning for you, so I'm happy to share your morning with you and discover your freediving journey and maybe like tap a little bit into your wisdom about freediving and your insight into the sport. You're originally from thank you. You're originally from Tunisia. Can you tell us a little bit about your life before freediving? Like, did you grow up in Tunisia?
Yeah, that's right. I grew up in Tunisia. Well, I was born in France, actually. But I was very young when we moved to Tunisia. My mother is French. My father is Tunisian. So they decided to move to Tunisia when I was 3 years old. So yeah, I grew up in Tunisia. So I would usually spend holidays either in the sea, at the sea in Tunisia or back to France. So yeah, I grew up in Tunisia until I was 23 years old, and then I moved to South America.
Right. So I understand you started exploring the underwater world quite young. Tell us how you discovered freediving.
Well, I think it's all related to my childhood in Tunisia, where we used to spend holidays close to the sea, and I would be spearfishing. And well, first I learned to swim at 4 or 5, and my parents had that strong passion and connection with the sea, so they would swim in open sea for hours. I remember looking at them from the beach, and I think that's why I got into that strong connection with the sea, and I fell in love with it. I started spearfishing when I was 10 or 12 years old, back in Tunisia too. But it was only a hobby back then. I didn't even know about the sport called freediving, where you have to hold your breath and go underwater. Yeah, it was mainly through spearfishing. So I didn't want. I mean, my main goal was not to catch necessarily any fish or kill any animal, just to stay down there for a long time and go as deep as possible. We're maybe 8 meters at that time. Well, proper freediving. I mean, competitive freediving. I started it when I arrived in Colombia some 12 to 13 years ago.
So you started spearfishing when you were really young. So would you go out would you just go out on your own and do that?
Yeah, basically, didn't have much experience. I mean, my parents would take me at sea, but I remember I could hardly equalize or anything like that. I mean, nobody knew much about it. But yeah, maybe later when I was a teenager, we had a little group of friends, Tunisian friends, and we would spend our holidays at sea, spearfishing the whole day, and yeah, hanging out on the beach and stuff.
And I guess you sort of like between your friends, you kind of like shared a little bit of like your personal knowledge so that you could improve a little bit over time, right?
Yeah, well, knowledge was very scarce at that time.
Yeah, we
didn't know much, so yeah, as I told you, I barely knew how to equalize. We didn't have proper equipment, just for the fun of it.
Yeah. So you first started getting into the competitive side of freediving when you moved to South America. Tell us how that happened.
Yeah, it's quite funny because I started traveling when I was 23, 24. I was basically a backpacker and traveling through South America. I had always had that passion and attraction for Latin and South America. So I did an internship in Argentina. That's where I started my journey, and I lived there for half a year. And then thanks to a Colombian friend I met there, I ended up in Colombia. And actually in Bogota, that's a city that's located very far away from the sea, maybe 1,000 kilometers from the sea. So, interestingly, surrounded by mountains. It's a high city located at 2,600 meters above sea level. So no sea at the moment. So I was badly missing it. And then I started swimming at the local swimming pool. They had that fancy, big, modern swimming complex. They just opened, so I started swimming there. And I noticed an interesting thing. There was a group of underwater rugby players. So I'm sure you heard about the sport, underwater rugby.
To be honest, I haven't actually. I've heard about underwater polo.
Really?
And I've heard about underwater hockey, and I haven't heard about rugby yet.
Well, actually, underwater rugby I think I found it much more interesting because first they practice that in a deep pool, so it's 5 meters pool usually, and the breath hold is longer than underwater hockey, and it's a bit less quick, let's say. I mean, underwater hockey is very quick and the breath holds are very short, but underwater rugby is typically sometimes even over 30 seconds breath hold, which is quite long because considering you don't breathe up at all.
Yeah, and you're exerting yourself the whole time as well, right?
Yeah, it's very, very tough. It's very physical, very tough. Actually had quite a lot of some injuries due to that and scars on my face and stuff. Anyways, I saw those people playing. I remember usually on Sundays they got that match. And one day they just saw me swimming around in the water. I didn't know anything about the sport. I was doing that on my own, which was a very bad thing. And they basically invited me to the game, and the guy explained me the game. I didn't understand anything, but everybody was punching me and hitting me in the water. But after the match, when the match ended, they told me, "Have you heard about a sport called apnea, freediving? You should do that because you're very bad at underwater rugby. You're too slow. I would hold the ball and hold my breath underwater. But told me you can't hold your breath longer than any one of these guys. So maybe you should consider that." And it's all started.
So it's kind of like you came to you took a little detour, a very quick detour into the sort of obscure world of underwater rugby first.
Very big detour because there was no freediving club at that moment. Well, at least in Bogota, nobody knew about the sport. So I started digging the internet. There was little information at the time, and I ended up meeting the two people who were representing the sport at the time, Frank Burnett and Walter Burnett. They are brothers. And at that time, they, especially Frank, used to write a lot of stuff on Deeper Blue forums. And I was an avid reader of that forum and read all those posts from Eric Fatah and other freedivers. That's how I got into it.
Mm-hmm. So when was like the first time that you did you take a course? Did you travel somewhere and take a course, go to a school and do some proper tuition?
Well, at first it was all self-taught and through Frank and his brother. I remember the first time he invited me at his local pool. I was so stressed out to meet that famous Colombian freediver. I remember I was so stressed out. I hit my head on the pool when I did my first dynamic. But Frank explained to me the basics of the sport, and there was no club or course close by at that time. And then I traveled to San Andres Island to do my first proper, freediving training with Carl, with water, and he coached me. And that's how I started static and holding my breath over 7 minutes and going to 50 meters also, deep constant weight. So, but a couple of years later, I took my first course with William Trubridge in the Bahamas.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to start.
Yeah. Well, it was a bit, as I told you, tough because there was no proper club or how to say space or infrastructure to train. So I would simply go to the underwater rugby games every day and arrive, half an hour before the start of the game and do my stuff with somebody safetying me, buddying me. Mainly static apnea at that time.
So at that time, were you already considering moving into more like the competitive arena?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember very well Frank asking me, hey, what's your interest in the sport? Do you want to go competitive? And I told him, yeah, why not? I mean, I would like to see how far I can go. That's what's motivating me.
It sounds like you had a really good breath hold in the beginning. When you first started to train depth, was there any challenges for you? Did it come very easily to you, or did you have to overcome some major challenges?
I wouldn't say that was that easy. I mean, I think as everybody, I had some problems equalizing. I don't know what you'd consider easy, but my breath hold was okay, was good. I have to admit I was cheating a bit too, so because I was living in Bogota, which is very high.
Right. So you
as I told you, yeah.
Hypoxic training every day.
Yeah, it was an amazing training. Very tough, though. Very tough. I remember first time I had to do 50 meters dynamic. It was such a huge, goal for me. So it's much harder to do these kinds of breath holds in Bogota than in any other place in the world, I think. So as soon as I would go to sea level, I had that, big hematocrit level, and it helped me a lot. So yeah, that was a bit of a help. And then for the depth part of it, well, as I told you, after a month of training, I would be able to go to 50 something meters. So
that's a fairly fast progression.
Yeah, I was doing okay, but then I was stuck for quite a long time at around 60 to 70 meters for some years.
Yeah, for some years, yeah. Right?
Yeah, yeah. It took me a long time to fine tune, equalization mainly, and lung adaptation especially, and strength, technique, and all the things you need to go deep.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to, for example, like Stefan Randik of Freedive Panlau. He said that he was stuck at 30 meters for 3 years. And when I say stuck, I mean, I think that it's more just that he was in a position where he didn't often have access to water much deeper than that. So he just basically spent all his time in 30-meter deep water. And then Thibaut Guignez, he had a similar circumstance that, he only had 45 meters. So for a couple of years, that's just basically what he worked with. And so what I'm saying is that I think it really helped him in the long term to have that almost like a pit stop where you could stop for a while and adapt properly and really get comfortable at that depth before moving on to go deeper.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Actually, the first years of my proper freediving training, I didn't even have access to the sea. So I was in that city, and I was mainly focusing on pool training. I didn't have any other option. And when I used to travel to San Andres at that time, there was nothing there. There no proper logistics to go deep, so I wouldn't do anything. And my first deep trainings, I did them in the Bahamas, on Long Island, with Will. So, and anyways, I had a very short time before, I mean, the period I had to train on Long Island was usually very short, so I didn't have the opportunity to go past, maybe 60 at that moment. I was stuck, as I told you, at that depth for quite a long time.
You might have been stuck there for quite a while, but in the last few years, you've really moved into the upper echelons of the freediving world with some pretty huge dives and amazing performances. Where do you train now, and most often?
Okay, right now I often train in San Andres Island, but it was a bit more complicated than that. After being training for some years between Bogota and Bahamas, it was quite expensive, and I knew I had to do something in my life to, if I wanted to seriously dedicate to freediving, or at least go deeper, I needed a proper adaptation to depth, especially for my lungs. So I decided to make a big move and leave Colombia and go to a place where I could do that every day. So basically I made a list with the best freediving spots in the world. Well, as far as I knew, because, my knowledge was a bit maybe limited at that time. And I ended up training in Tenerife. So I spent there a year and a half where I would train almost, well, not every day, but at least 3 to 4 times a week to adapt my lungs and really go from zero again to reach, at the end, after a year and a half, I reached 85, 90 meters. And then I decided to quit my job, the job I had there, and go back to the Caribbean. So I went to Roatan, and I lived there for a year or so. And again, I would train almost every day until I understood how to go past 90 and reach 100. And then at that time, I missed Colombia and the South American vibe and life, So I came up with that idea to come back to San Andres. And I remember during all those years out of Colombia, we had amazing conditions in San Andres. And I decided to give it a shot and come back. And I said, why not organize something? Organize a competition with a proper logistic where we could train and properly adapt to depth and do that constantly, because it's the only way, you can go deep and safe in a safe manner. So that's where I decided to come back.
So did you also end up pursuing a career as a freediving instructor?
That's true, but that was much later because it was not my first objective at the beginning. I was much more interested in competing and achieving records in depth, and I was being really fascinated by depth and trying to go deeper and deeper. So could you repeat your question again? Sorry.
So I'm just wondering, to be honest, I'm curious about how you what were you doing in Tenerife that you supported yourself while you were also trying to seriously train for freediving?
Yeah, I forgot to mention I used to be a computer science engineer, so I worked in the computer field and other fields too, in teaching language, translator, interpreter, and in the marketing area. So yeah, basically I went to Tenerife to look for a job, and I was lucky enough. It was very tough at that time, but I found a job in a marketing company. My language skills helped quite a lot. So I would work in the morning and train in the afternoon past 7 p.m. In Spain, they have usually it starts to become dark at 9 p.m. So I had some time to train after the office, after the work. So I would train with a Colombian fellow freediver there who lives there, Alejandro, and who I actually coached and trained, and he's now the Colombian record holder for constant weight.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I'm just thinking like I live here in Taiwan. We're quite close to the well, it gets dark like almost every night around like between 5:30 and 6:30 through the year, and I'm just thinking how crazy that is that I've lived here for so long and that's normal because I come from Northern Europe, you know, so sometimes it doesn't even get dark, you know, really at all at like, you know, later.
Yeah, like here, like here in Colombia, usually at 6, it's already dark.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah. So you live on you're kind of living on San Andres now.
Well, not exactly. A bit more complicated than that. I actually live in Medellin.
Right, that's a city in Colombia, right?
Yeah, which is far away from the sea too.
Yeah.
It's just that for me, it's more practical that way because it's hard to spend the whole year on San Andres Island. It's a bit complicated level of paperwork and residency and stuff. And then it's a small island. It's very beautiful. But then I need to do my pool and gym training. So I have the best pools here in Medellin and then gym training too, CrossFit and stuff. And then I go to San Andres each 2 months or 1.5 months to do my depth training.
Depth training, okay.
Yeah.
So tell us, could you kind of outline for us what a typical week of training would be like for you? Now, of course, I understand that will change with your periodization. So
sure.
maybe if you could like give us a little idea about the periodization as well, and then what you would do each week.
Well, I try different training cycles. In the past, I used to do the typical training cycle where you do only strength and pool during several months a year, and then move to the sea and do only depth training for 2 or 3 months, and then, or even more, maybe 5 to 6 months. That's the typical way I used to do it when I lived on Rattan Island or the Bahamas or Tenerife. But that way I found that I used to quickly lose my strength and my physical shape quite quickly. I'm very sensitive to differences in diet and basically not having a proper gym to train at. That's usually the case in remote islands where I train. So yeah, usually on all these islands, remote islands, it's very hard to find a proper way to train strength. So I would improvise my own home gym, but even that way, it's not easy to maintain strength and physical shape for a long time, especially with bad food. And I'm talking about all these remote islands, usually in the Caribbean. It's very hard to find, and the humidity and the weather doesn't help at all. So I switched to doing a much shorter cycle where I train pool and strength in the city, and then move to a close by island like San Andres to do my focus on my depth training. And I do the whole cycle in 3 months.
Right.
Or so.
Okay. And so when you're in the city, what would a typical week of training look like for you?
Okay, sorry, I didn't answer the question. In the city, I usually focus on pool training. So I would do my pool training at midday. We have a very nice Olympic swimming pool close by a few blocks from my place. So we have a group. I run a little school, a group of people, and a school, freediving school here. So we usually train at midday, and then have lunch, rest a bit, and then do my gym training or CrossFit in the afternoon at around 4 or 5 p.m.
Right. So you mentioned gym training and CrossFit. So are these the main complementary trainings that you do for your freediving training?
Well, I'm always trying different things. So CrossFit is something new for me. I started CrossFit maybe three months ago. But gym training has always been very important for me. So I think I needed to maintain strength and resistance. Do you
also practice things like? I guess if you have the pool to train at, then you don't really bother with. I'm guessing you don't bother with like sitting and doing CO2 tables in your bedroom, right, or things like this.
Not anymore.
You
no.
can do that in the pool, right?
Yeah, I hate holding my breath dry. I used to do that when I lived in Bogota and didn't have any access to sea or proper pool training. So I used to do a lot of CO2, walking apnea, hypoxic training with something in your mouth, altitude training, climbing to some high places in the mountain, all that stuff. I tried all that stuff, and then it's a lot of suffering, I think. So now I prefer to only do my things in the pool and actually restrict my hypercapnic training also, because it's a lot of suffering.
Do you feel like, even though it's a lot of suffering, do you think that at the time it was of great benefit to you? Or do you think now that, if you could go back to that time when you didn't have access to the pool or the water so often, would you do things differently? Or would you just torture yourself again?
It's hard to tell. It's surely a good basis, and I'm happy I did all that stuff. And I was doing very well also in the pool. Now I stopped it. On another hand, I think there are always smarter ways to train, and now I focus a lot more on the diving reflex and relaxation, and I don't know, I would say the focus is different. And another important thing, aspect is to mention is that in the pool, I of course feel a lot of contractions like everybody, but when I do depth, I don't feel any contraction at all. So this for me is very important. And freediving is a lot about sensations and feelings, and I don't want to hold my breath feeling horrible contractions all the time. So that's why I exclusively switched to depth training, and I stopped competing in pool. So I don't know if it answers your question, but
right, yeah, no, for sure it does, yeah. So I recently read on a Facebook page post that you made that. So I'll just read this here.
Yeah.
You were doing the last medical checks on your lungs and blood tests, cardiac monitoring before starting this new season. I perform a whole bunch of medical tests each year to verify I'm fit for freediving, since we are exposing our bodies to extreme conditions and some issues are very hard to detect with normal auscultation. So tell us, what kind of tests were you doing, and what are you looking for, and what issues may be difficult to detect with normal tests?
Well, I basically think that the typical medical, they ask for when we go to a competition is not enough at all, because, everybody knows that. Basically what I look for is, mainly check my lungs. And I usually listen to Frank's advices. He's a lung doctor who knows a lot about all that stuff. And our medic, also the competition, Jose, is very versed into this. So basically, the exams I've done were carbon monoxide diffusion, which is, I think, the most the best way to see if there is any injury in your lungs, I would say. Yeah. So it basically detects and tests the integrity of the alveolar wall. So you basically inhale some carbon monoxide and do like a spirometer check, and they test the difference between the carbon monoxide that you're inhaling versus the one that you're exhaling. So this is, I think, the only accurate way to see if we suffer the lung squeeze. And then other checks, like spirometer and cardioelectrogram, blood tests, etc. And it also helps to be checked by a proper, lung doctor, because I saw that many issues cannot be detected by a normal auscultation when a doctor listens at your lungs.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost kind of crazy to expect to detect, like all the different things that could go wrong with the lungs, and to kind of detect them with like a little piece of, metal and tube pressed against the chest.
There's always,
an X-ray, which is
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way you can see that on an X-ray test or even a scan. It has to be performed in some. There are different ways also to do the exams, and I mean, it's quite complicated. So usually we need much more medical staff or experience to determine if we are squeezed or not, or any other issue,
Have you, Walid, had experience in the past with squeezies or lung injuries? Is that something that you've had to deal with?
Unfortunately, yeah. In some occasions, especially when I enter a new kind of depth or suffer some kind of accident. Usually, it's a complex topic and it's hard to determine if it's an edema or a squeeze. There are a lot of different words for that. And I noticed that everybody is different and has different symptoms or different ways to show them. So just to give you an example, I almost never had any kind of blood or noticed any blood in my mouth or spitting blood. When it happened in the past, when moving to a different depth or adapting to a new depth, the edema I would feel might include hearing some noises in the trachea or stuff like that, rather than blood or any other symptoms I saw or heard of.
Do you think that there's any kind of major mistakes that are commonly made in training for freediving? Like, if you could give one piece of advice to freedivers, what would it be?
Well, I think it's a sport, it's a new sport where we are learning every day. So I'm not saying I hold the absolute truth about it, but maybe I would say lack of spending enough time at depth. I think it's a strange sport. I'm not even sure it's a sport at all, because it's the only sport where we spend at the most 2 or 3 minutes at the exact conditions we need to train for. I mean, to adapt to. It's as if you ask an athlete in, I don't know, any other field, like swimming, or I know it has nothing to do, but to train for 2 or 3 minutes, the stuff they do. So what I mean is that we need maybe to spend more time down there. So basically, one of my favorite ways of training is our hangs. So I think, or any other, activity that obliges you to stay there for enough time to adapt your lines, like spearfishing, for example. So I think that's one aspect. And well, maybe the other aspect is, maybe some people put too much or give too much importance to all that preparation and stuff we usually do before. So all that I don't know, yogic training or stretching your lungs and drinking this or doing that, and all that silence and I would find even stressful atmosphere on the platform right before going to dive. I think it's too much attention paid to everything being perfect, and we all know that at sea usually nothing is perfect. It's like a very chaotic thing. Anything can happen. So I'm not. I think I would prefer to dive in almost any condition as long as it's safe.
You kind of echo what Aaron Solomons was saying about maybe quite a few divers are a little bit pampered, or maybe pamper themselves too much with their quiet time and their breathe ups and that kind of thing, and just before they do their dives.
Exactly.
Being supported on various different floating contraptions and things like this.
Yeah, and depending on too many variables and too many, having this right, doing this kind of specific training, because if anything goes wrong in that routine, I would say, then you can imagine the consequences on your psychology.
Yeah, it's a psychological issue, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's very important to be ready to dive in almost any conditions. I mean, as long as there is no current and everything is safe, I think it's not an issue if somebody is talking or well, I mean, if it's, we don't want it to be a mess anyways, but neither. But I think sometimes, yeah, we put too much attention to these factors. Yeah, you made me remember a guy once. It was so funny. A friend of us. We were training long before one of the competitions, San Andres, and then this guy. I mean, he's a good friend of mine. He was new to the sport, but anyway, he was going to maybe 40, 50 meters on free immersion, and then he was always spending such a huge amount of time to prepare and breathe up. But then we were all waiting for him, and he would maybe breathe up for 10 minutes or so. So we were all like, looking at our watch and looking at him, and he was so focused and so in his thing. And then he put his face in the water and started pulling on the rope. And it was so funny because he was pulling the whole thing, and he was actually on the surface. He didn't move anyway. He didn't even go even 1 meter maybe or so, but he was pulling the whole thing up and didn't even realize. And he ended up pulling the whole thing, the whole rope. We had a whole bunch of rope. We were all laughing so loud. I think we had to stop him because he would create some issue with the rope. So it's funny because he had his eyes closed and thought maybe he was going to 40 something meters. And funniest thing was that he was equalizing his ears with his hands all the time. So,
but there was no pressure change.
Yeah. Just to say that sometimes maybe we forget to be more aware of our source.
Yeah, I guess we can it's good to program yourself to do certain things, like pull on the rope in a certain way or equalize. But if you over program yourself to the point where you're not even you could almost fall asleep and still do these things, then it's, you've kind of missed the point, haven't you, of being present during the act.
Yeah. I was sexting also a girl once, and she had a huge breath hold, and then she went into 25 something meters, it was maybe 20 meters, I don't recall, but anyway, she was free falling, or she was thinking she was free falling, and actually she wasn't. She was completely motionless for maybe a minute or so, and it was maybe funny at the beginning, but it could be scary because she then ended up continuing her dive, having lost, a huge amount of time, and didn't even realize she was completely still for all that long time, and she continued her dive. So I had to go after her and stop her from going deeper because, it's funny how sometimes we forget about, only listening or paying attention to things like depth, the pressure, the change in light and cold and temperature and stuff like that.
Yeah. Valuable lessons learned there for sure. What is your nutrition like, Walid? Do you eat are you as sensitive to what you eat as to how you train?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all my friends know me because I eat a huge amount of food. So I've always been famous for that. So I think I'm one of the only freedivers who eat quite a lot even before going to dive. However, I've been always experiencing with diet, and especially lately and ultimately, I've been trying quite different stuff because I think it's very personal. That diet is something so complicated, so complex, and so personal. Well, in my specific case, I have a very fast metabolism, and I burn glycogen very, very quickly and very rapidly. So I used to be a diver and an athlete who depends a lot on carbs and well, of course, proteins, but especially carbs to get my energy from. And lately, I found that this can be quite detrimental and sometimes cause a lot of issues in my dives because it's a source of energy that, basically ends up very quickly, and I can be quickly in a state of total weakness. So I'm experiencing with other diets, and I'm trying to lower my intake of carbs and be more, make my body more efficient with the energy it takes. I mean, the sources it takes energy from.
So are you suggesting that you're experimenting with more like perhaps becoming more adapted to burn fat more efficiently as well as carbohydrates?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it's something, big mistake I've made for several years. And it ended up costing me, I think, a lot of dives. And basically, it's, as you mentioned, trying to be more, take my energy from other sources than carbs, mainly fats. Yeah, healthy fats.
Yeah, I think I think it's we can be well adapted to use carbohydrates efficiently and use fats efficiently when they're both needed. I think the problem is that so many people they'll overdo one or the other. So
yeah.
Especially they'll just eat so many carbs that they'll be eating all through the day from when they wake up to when they go to bed at night. So their body is never in a position that it really needs to burn fat, so it doesn't develop the adaptation. So a lot of folk, if you suggest to them that they miss breakfast, for example, then they're going to feel awful the first time they do that because their body just is waiting for the carbohydrates and not actually efficiently burning fat.
I'm not brave enough to start to try the intermittent fasting approach. I'm reading on it and making quite a lot of research on it, and it seems very interesting, especially for us freedivers. But I think I still need some. I mean, these kind of adaptations have to be very, very gradual, of course. And,
yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about like extreme, like the extremes of like ketosis. Like eating like mainly fats, using mostly fats for energy. I've done a couple of years now of done quite a lot of intermittent fasting, but what I discovered was, because I started freediving after I experimented with that for the first time. For example, I would always run. I'd go out and run every morning, fasted. So I'd be mainly using, fat, to get myself through that run. But when I started freediving, I started to notice that I really felt much better if I had a small carbohydrate-rich meal in the mornings before my dives. So it's just about finding the right balance, about learning your body and learning, what the right time is for that balance of nutrients.
Yeah, this is something that's very hard to understand, as you said, how our body works. I mean, human body knows how to go to the moon, but we still don't know what we need to eat. So yeah, it's very complex. And in my case, I realized that if I take the usual carbs intake through oatmeal like everybody does, and it's kind of in freediving we do a lot of things through kind of fashions or because
everyone else says that's the way to do it.
Yeah, and I found that taking oatmeals, for example, in the breakfast is, for me, is something wrong. It doesn't help in any way. I mean, this supposed quantity of energy it gives runs out very, very quickly, and I ended up without any. I mean, very weak. So I switched to eating some different kind of stuff like eggs, for example, in the morning, which is something that is common in some countries, like here, but. I don't think any freedivers do that, but I started switching to these kind of things, and I think it works much better, at least for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you need to, not follow the trends because other people tell you. You need to eat something. You need to, really feel deeply how you feel about that, and if you're eating whole foods and real foods, whether it's, I eat mostly plants. So, whether that's sweet potatoes and lentils, or, if you're into meat, if you eat like a piece of meat from the butcher, or if you eat eggs, it's all the same. It's real foods. But if you're eating things like French fries and McDonald's hamburgers and, packets of chocolate biscuits from the convenience store, then you're never going to find out what is good for you, because none of it's going to be good for you.
Yeah, true. I would say especially sugar. I mean, I think that's the most, the worst thing and the most important thing to avoid is processed sugars and processed food in general, as you said. But sugar mainly, I mean, it's the insulin spike has a lot of negative effects on your dive. So, it's quite complex, especially that, also that, well, it can be dangerous sometimes to experience this kind of thing, especially when you're going deep. And sometimes it's the testing itself can be quite tricky. Always try to do that when on the first phases of diving, of course, and then maintain the whole thing and not avoid making any last minute change. That's the most dangerous thing, I think.
All right, Walid, I've got a couple of questions from Patreon supporters. I've got Arthur Kudla here from, I think Arthur's from Sydney. He has a question for you about the World Championships. He's asking about your deepwater blackout experience there. Maybe first, perhaps you could tell us exactly what happened, and then Arthur would like to know what you've learned from that experience.
Yeah, I was expecting that one. That was a terrible experience. I usually don't black out at depth, but this particular dive, and especially in such a big event, was of course something very very negative experience for me. First, the reasons for the accident, I think, just to make it short. The preparation on that day was awful, was very bad. First, of course, for the increased stress of the competition and the way they had the other rope in front of me, when I could see Alexei finishing his dive and getting a red card, and knowing that I was going for the world champ title, basically. I had a lot of stress, but I know everybody was in the same conditions, and it's not an excuse. But there were also some other bad aspects in that preparation, especially due to some judges on the platform arguing about or discussing my lanyard some minutes before the official top, and I was not aware, or I didn't understand very well what was going on, and I heard that discussion about my lanyard. Actually, it wasn't the same lanyard I was using, but they saw something wrong on it, but just decided to tell my coach, and on that particular moment, maybe 2 to 3 minutes before my official top.
Right.
And there was screaming on the platform and stuff. Well, it was not the best breath up, but anyways, as I told you, I usually perform well even under stress. The other thing that went wrong was that on that particular day also I did a last minute change. As I said, it's a very bad thing on my diet, and I had a different breakfast, so I felt very weak, and I think that was the main reason for that blackout.
May I ask
sure.
what the difference was in your diet?
Well, I usually have a bigger breakfast with, as I told you, some eggs and more fat and more energy basically into it. And that day I skipped that. I just heard to some advice, and I did that last minute change. I'd actually know that the main reason for that blackout was general weakness of the body. Basically, my muscles were completely deprived of glycogen, and actually, even after the blackout, I felt very, very weak, and I was, clearly, my muscles were empty, basically. So the stress from the breath up combined with that bad preparation, I think that was the major cause of this awful blackout. Fortunately, I recovered from that. That's why also I performed all those checks, medical checks, several times right after the dive, and then recently here, and I stopped diving for several months until I'm sure I'm completely recovered. Well, what I learned from that is, I will pay much more attention to my diet. I know that I'm very sensitive to shifts in glucose levels and energy levels in the body. Well, I know it's a dive that I performed long before the comp, and even 1 year before, and the weeks before the competition. So it's not a depth that I should be worried about. It was of course a strong dive, but it's something I did several times, and I was okay about that. It was not, I think, a risky announcement or anything like that. I mean, I know conditions in the World Champs are very different. Also, the rope we were using was not the best at all, and I could feel the stretch. I know also other athletes also were using the same rope, but in my particular case, I think it was an issue because I'm used to almost zero stretch rope at our facility in San Andres in the competition, and it surely made a big difference. So when I was pulling on that rope, I felt like I was going nowhere. It's not criticizing. I mean, the comp was great, and I'm not criticizing anybody. It's just the conditions. I mean, the way it was that particular day on that particular dive.
Yeah.
So
not the best day for you.
No, surely not. Yeah, I felt also sorry about the people diving after me and all the mess it caused. So I apologize.
There was quite a bit of a mess going on during a couple of days of that competition. So
yeah, we had some very hard days also before. I forgot to mention, but the first day of the Caribbean Cup, I know I should have canceled that dive. The weather we had some very bad weather conditions, and it was I was freezing and I was already starving, and they had to postpone the dive for those conditions, which is not usual in Bretagne. Usually we have perfect conditions. And then that delay in my official top also was not the best. I thought I could do the dive because it's something I've done before, a lot of times. But that delay and the cold, and there was some current. But then during my warm up, I tried to see and check the current, and I found it okay. So I decided to go for the dive. I probably should have canceled that day because mainly of the delay and the impact it has on my energy levels, and cold also, because we get knocked a lot. So narcosis also affected me in a huge way.
And that handily leads us on to the next question, because Alex Davis, who's another Patreon supporter, he's from Barbados. Mm-hmm. He would like to know, since you are one of the top contenders right now in free immersion, have you found any training routines or techniques to help you manage your necrosis? Is that something that you're discovering now? Yeah,
that's the ultimate obstacle for me, I think. Also, strength at those depths. It's an interesting process in freediving. I think that's the most interesting thing in the sport, that we go through a lot of obstacles during our sporting career, and that oblige us to find all kind of tricks and solutions. And so, say people are, or in my case, I was stuck at 60 meters at the beginning, and then I ended up finding the way to master frenzel with mouthfeel and stuff, and then I was stuck at 90 meters, and then I found a way to improve my mouthfeel. Yeah, then I was stuck at 90 meters, and I had to find a proper way to do the mouthfeel correctly. I fine-tuned that. I found a solution. Then now I definitely solved the equalization problem. And now what I'm facing is extreme narcosis and muscle failure. So narcosis is something we always have when we go past 100, even past 90 sometimes, or on very deep, or even not that deep hangs, when I do hangs at 40 or 50, I feel knocked. But anyways, past 115, it's another thing, and narcosis is much, much more serious and stronger. And on my very deep dives, that was also a very big issue. On the way, I would do the pools, or even my mind clarity, I would say. So, well, to make it short, to overcome that, I think there are two ways. One is to get used to it. So, as I said before, I think we don't spend enough time at depth. So basically, doing hangs at a certain depth, of course, with the proper safety and extreme cautious about safety, will help you improve that aspect. So you get used to it, basically. And then the other way to do it is minimize the production of CO2. But this is, of course, something quite complex, and I think it can be achieved through the proper diet. So there are ways to eat things that, don't increase your CO2 level. Yeah, I think the main way to overcome it is getting used to it.
Right. Would you have an example of foods that would minimize the production of CO2?
Yeah, it goes back to what I talked about earlier. So we know that consuming carbs increases the CO2, or the breathing sorry, I forgot the exact term about it. But the production of CO2 versus burning fat or other sources of energy.
Yeah, Alex also wants to know, I don't know if this is entirely appropriate for this podcast, but if you have any advice for learning a new language. Because he saw you doing lots of translating in multiple languages on the live stream at the Worlds. Any short piece of advice for Alex there?
Well, I think it's the same as for freediving. A lot of patience. Sorry. I think learning a language is something that's how to say, it is a very different process than a mathematical equation or learning physical stuff. It's not something you can explain to somebody, hey, do this or just learn this grammatical rule. Or I think it's something like sport that is learned through practice. So basically, just go to a foreign country and practice as much as you can, or marry a foreign girl. That's the best way to learn it, I think. I work in Taiwan, and I have 3 female Taiwanese colleagues who sit behind me behind my desk, and I've been sitting behind them for the last 2 years, and I've learned more from them than anyone else, I think, because they're just constantly gossiping and shouting and talking, and if you can have 3 good girls like that in your life, it will help you a lot to learn a language. Yeah, and to go to a further level, there's a saying, the best way to learn a language is sleeping with a dictionary.
Right. Let me ask you about the Nirvana Oceanquest freediving competition that you organize. It's held on San Andres Island in Colombia. Can you tell us about the location where San Andres is? What makes it special?
Yeah, well, San Andres is a Colombian island. It's quite far away from the mainland. It's actually much closer to Nicaragua and Central America. So it's in that same area of Central America. Basically the good things about San Andres is that we freedive on the west side of the island, so it's protected from the trade winds. And we usually have no current most part of the year. Sometimes it gets a bit rough, but it's usually around December or or January. In May, for the period of the competition, it's usually flat calm. The other advantages are water temperature, so it's almost always 29 degrees. There's almost no thermocline or very little. It goes maybe 25 degrees at 100 meters. So it's a good thing. And then the viz is quite amazing. Sincerely, rarely have seen such a good visibility. And I've been diving in quite a lot of places. Well, we have quite a decent depth close to the shore. So we have 200 meters beneath the platform, which is located some 500 meters or 400 meters from the shore. The conditions on the island for safety and medical are quite good because they have a good hospital with a hyperbaric chamber. And the island is small, so it makes it relatively easy to evacuate a person from the platform then to the shore, and from the shore to the hospital. What else? Well, the logistic is nice. We have a nice platform, and as I'm competing also, I try to do my best. I usually put a lot of emphasis on the stuff we have, so everybody can perform well, because I also want to perform well. So we have a good rope, 12 millimeters Dyneema rope, no stretch. We also have all the medical equipment. So I knew that to secure all that gear we need to buy it. So I bought all that stuff myself. It's very hard to rent it, or we have the Red Cross on site, but we also have our own medical equipment. So suction machine, AED, oxygen tank, all the stuff we need nowadays for freediving competition. And I make also sure we have all that stuff during the trainings, because many times we have all the requisites and the people out there during the calm, but what about the trainings beforehand? And we will be training there 2 months prior to the event. So I make sure we have all the medical stuff, and the first AC will be traveling 2 or 3 weeks before the event. Yeah, well, San Andres can be reached from the mainland usually. Unfortunately, we don't have any international flight unless from Panama. The only international flight is from Panama. And then the rest is from mainland Colombia, so Bogota or Medellin.
How about the competition itself? How many days will that be over? And what kind of, if anyone wanted to come and take part in the competition, like what kind of opportunities do you have for training before the competition?
Yeah, so they basically get 6 competition days. It lasts for 1 week. We have 3 competition days, and then 1 day off and 3 comp days. So you can get a chance at any of the 3 depth disciplines each day. Nice.
Maybe I'll have a go myself in a couple of years.
Yeah, sure. It would be awesome. We're planning on, we are negotiating with an underwater drone with guys from Dive and hope we'll have them there. Anyways, we'll make sure to have an underwater filming, and we have a great photographer also, Laura. She's very good at taking awesome pictures. We will have a nice group of people training this year. Alessia has already signed up for the competition, so she'll be training with us, and we hope also many others.
Yeah, well, I really hope that you can develop the interest in that. I'm looking at pictures of the island now. It looks absolutely stunning. The water looks amazing.
Yeah, the conditions are really beautiful. It's not because I teach there or anything. I teach also in many other places in the world. I don't have any particular attachment, but yeah, the visibility especially, and the water temperature and the no current conditions make it very, very nice.
So if you had to dive in one place for the rest, I know this is a very difficult question, but if you had to dive in one place for the rest of your life, would it be San Andres or somewhere else?
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer. San Andres is, for me, personally, it's also a personal thing, because for freediving, I also feel we need some kind of inspiration, and without being too much spiritual, but I think there is that particular place, that sea cliff, it's called Nirvana, on that particular spot of the island is very beautiful, and in some way it inspires me, and well, I just feel relaxed and in that place. But there are also other places, of course. The Blue Hole in the Bahamas, it has amazing conditions, but for me, the visibility is very important, especially when you get knocked at those depths. You don't want to be too dark, so I like being able to see things. The other thing also is, if you asking me if I want to spend my my life on some place for the rest of my existence, I would need also nice conditions on the island and stuff. Maybe I would choose. I definitely like the Caribbean. Then there are some Caribbean islands where you have also a very nice conditions of living. I would say Curacao. I was there last year, and I can find an equilibrium between many different things, like being able to train, having nice conditions on the island, nice food, and which is something that's sometimes we miss in other Caribbean islands.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. For San Andres, we have you can have healthy food, and we're lucky enough to have a lot of things from the mainland, from Colombia. Colombia is a tropical island with a lot of fruits and veggies, so that's a good thing. It's just that each island in the Caribbean has its own thing and very, very own particularities. Roatan is very beautiful too. It's very natural. But sometimes I feel that if I want to live on an island, I would need maybe some more modern stuff, and even a decent internet connection.
Yeah.
That's something so hard to find on these islands.
Yeah. Do you see freediving as you mentioned the spiritual dynamic of the island there? Is freediving a spiritual pursuit for you? Do you see it in that way, or is it more of a sport for you?
Well, there's definitely, I would say, more than spiritual and inspirational side to it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think I need to have, things around me as simple as be surrounded by my friends or the people who support me, and a spot that inspires me, relaxation, peace of mind. And that particular spot helps me in that way. For the rest, I would say it's a sport, and it's very, I consider it, I look at it from an athletic point of mind, but also I would say more than sport or athletical, I would say physiological. And for me, freediving is a lot about a physiological transformation of the body, where you have to adapt not only your lungs and all the physiology behind it, but also your mind and brain to accept the pressure and be one with the ocean and just be there.
Do you have a morning ritual? When you wake up in the morning, is there a sequence of events that you have to go through before you can start your day, or do you just get up and do whatever?
No, not necessarily. I don't have any particular routine. Even though when I'm close to a competition phase, I do my stretching and stuff, but it's not a necessary routine. And actually, I have quite a stressful, I would say, way of life, because especially when I have to organize, and you must know that organizing something on remote islands is not always easy, and I have to go through a lot of stuff, and I usually first focus on my work job and paperwork, stuff like that. But yeah, when I'm close to big dive or an important competition, then I would go through my usual stretching, just getting the diaphragm ready and the intercostal muscles and stuff like that. Yeah, but not anything particular more than that.
I understand you're very busy. Do you get much time to read? Can you recommend a book or an author for the listeners?
Yeah, usually most of my reading is about either work related or freediving related, or I mean physiology or diet or things like that. But yeah, definitely. I have, well, my favorite book, I would say, is, I don't know if you know Leo Africanus. It's an old book from a Lebanese author called Amin Malouf. It's, well, it's a historical novel, let's say. I like this kind of book. He was an Andalusi diplomat who was born in Spain, and then that was in 1494 something. And yeah, it's a historical novel about that moment of history between Occident and the West and the East. It's quite an interesting book about that period of the time, which I find interesting.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting to me. I'm looking at it now. I'm gonna pick up a copy as soon as I can.
Yeah, it's from Amin Malouf.
Nice.
Lebanese.
Thank you for the recommendation.
Sure.
So, Walid, what are your plans for the future? What are your dreams for the future too? Do you have any long-term plans, or are you just kind of taking it 1 year at a time, or 1 day at a time?
I have a lot of plans this year. Well, my first focus and priority is the competition, Nirvana Oceanquest in San Andreas. That's, it's a huge amount of work every day, so I need to focus on that first. And then I'm going to compete at my competition also, if the organization part allows me to, of course. The priority is that everything goes smooth and perfect. If I have the chance to, I would do some dives, but not too deep. I definitely take a shot at other disciplines this year, because for me, free immersion was a transition to other disciplines. I think it's well, for me, it has been a good strategy, because now that I adapted my body to decent depths and decent dive times, also because free immersion obliged you to have 4+ minutes dive times, and the pulls on the rope make it harder to adapt to your lungs. So now that I have this, I will focus on other disciplines. Well, I would probably try that after the Nirvana Oceanquest. So if I have a chance to, I would go to other competitions in Roatan and in the Bahamas, Virgin Blue probably. And then, my next move will be, I haven't told about it anybody, I think, yet. But yeah, we will move to Curacao in the Dutch Antilles. So the next step will be developing freediving there and
interesting.
Developing the school there. So I found it an interesting spot to, as I told you, to be living and teaching and training in awesome conditions. So yeah, Curacao will be the next move.
Yeah, well, I wish you the most success possible in the competition, in organizing the competition, and also in taking part in the competition, and all the future training and competing that you're going to do. I'm looking forward to hearing more about your adventures in Curacao when that stage of the journey begins.
Thanks a lot, buddy. Yeah, thanks.
Walid, to take us out, can you just say in a few words, why do you freedive?
Well, I would say mainly because I'm curious to know how deep I can go. I think it's something that has always been in my mind, and my main motivation is to understand my body and know how deep I can go. If I reach some limit, well, I would be happy also to know it. I think it's mainly curiosity. And then beside that, of course, there's the lifestyle and the fact that we all want to be free underwater and the sensations it brings. But I think, mainly it's curiosity.
And if people want to find you online, do you have a website? What
Sure.
are the, if you want to find out about yourself or the competition, the
Nirvana.
Nirvana Ocean, is it Nirvana Oceanquest? I keep getting
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I have a website, walidboudhiaf.com. I know my last name is a bit complex to spell. Or just look at maybe Walid Apnea or something like that. And then, yeah, the competition site is freedivingcolombia.com. If you want to come to Colombia also, we have some informations on the website and about the island and other places also in Colombia, because Colombia is a huge country and it's great. I mean, there are so many things to discover. So just drop me a mail and we'll talk about it, or any other place in the Caribbean.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those guys listening, I'll put all those addresses in the show notes so you can find them there too. Yeah, Walid, thank you once again. Thank you tremendously for starting your day really early with the Freedive Café and its listeners.
No worries.
And I really appreciate it. I'm going to get ready for my bed now. We're like in completely different sides of the world here.
Yeah, I know.
So good luck with your training, your competing and the competition, and hope to speak to you again sometime soon.
Sure, Donnie. Okay, thank you very much for all. And you're very welcome. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, enjoy your day, Walid. Bye-bye.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
That was Walid Boudhiaf. Walid is a super strong diver. He's at the top of his game and looks like he's gonna stay up there for some years to come. Looking forward to seeing a lot more from that man. If you're in the market for some awesome gear and would like to get free shipping on it, go to 2bfreeequipment.com and have a look at their buoys and lanyards. Put Freedive Café free shipping in the order notes and it's done. Feel free to add me on Facebook, where I am Donnie Mac. Follow me on Instagram, where I am Donnie McFar, DONNYMCFAR. Otherwise, if you have any questions or suggestions, you can also contact me through the website. Until next time, which will be very soon, dive safe.